Picture a single bone, a human hip bone, dug out of a riverbank in northern Germany, and stuck inside it, still there after more than 3,000 years, is a bronze arrowhead. Now here's the part that should give you chills. That arrow didn't kill this person instantly. They ran with it in them. They fought. And somewhere in the mud along that river, they went down next to at least 150 other people who died the exact same day. No country did this. No flag, no general, no declaration of war. Just people deciding that other people had to die. And we've been doing it for a very long time. So let me ask you something. Did we invent war? Did some clever, brutal ancestor sit down one day and cook it up? Or has this thing always been inside us? Now look, I dig into questions like this every single week. The stuff they don't teach you in school. So if you're the kind of person who can't sleep until you know, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. It's free, it takes 1 second, and honestly, it's the only reason a small channel like mine keeps going. Okay, deal? Cool. Let's get into it. Here's the thing nobody tells you. The answer completely depends on what you mean by war. Because if you mean uniforms, armies, supply lines, generals moving pieces on a map, yeah, that has a start date. We can point right to it. But if you mean something older, one group of humans deliberately hunting down another group of humans, that trail goes back so far, it stops being a history question. It becomes a question about what we are. So let's follow the trail, and let's start where it always starts, the bones. For years, scientists thought organized violence only showed up after we started farming. The logic made sense, right? You grow crops, you store food, you build a village. Now you've got something worth stealing. So now you fight. No farms, no war. That was the theory. Then they found the bodies by the lake. A group of hunter-gatherers, people who owned nothing but what they could carry, found dead in a marsh, skulls crushed, knees shattered, one person with their hands apparently tied behind them. These folks had no granary, no walls, no borders, nothing to steal, and somebody wiped them out anyway. So why? Maybe it was territory. Maybe it was revenge. Maybe it was something we'll never pull out of a pile of old bones. But it blew that whole farming caused war theory wide open, because the violence was there before the farms. Which brings up a really uncomfortable question. If it wasn't farming that started this, then what if it was never about stuff at all? What if it's about us? To test that, we have to leave the humans for a minute and go into the forest, because our closest living relatives, chimpanzees, will answer this question for us, and you're not gonna like the answer. Researchers watching a chimp community for years saw something horrifying. The group split in two. And then the bigger group started hunting the smaller one. Not in one big fight, in quiet, coordinated raids. Small patrols would slip into enemy territory, find one chimp alone, surround him, and beat him to death. One at a time, over years. Sit with that. We share almost 99% of our DNA with chimps. We split from a common ancestor millions of years ago. And they do this. Coordinated, territorial, lethal. Which means the ability to do this, it might be way, way older than humans. We might not have invented war at all. We might have just inherited it. Now, this is where the smartest people on Earth start yelling at each other. One camp says war is in our blood, hardwired. Millions of years of evolution baked it right in. They point to old societies where a shocking number of men died violently. Not 1 or 2% like the modern world, but 15, 20, even 25% dying at the hands of other humans. The other camp says, hold on, war isn't in your genes. It's a tool, something we invented under very specific conditions. They argue that a murder isn't a war. A family feud isn't a war. Real war needs organization, leaders, a plan, and the ability to look at another human and decide they're not really human at all. And that stuff, They say that's learned, not born. So who's right? Honestly, probably both, and neither. Because the capacity for violence is clearly ancient. The chimps have it, the old bones have it. But capacity isn't war. Your neighbor is capable of punching you in the face. That doesn't mean the neighborhood's at war. War needs something more. And that something more comes down to one idea. One simple, brutal idea. Having something worth fighting over that you can't run away with. For most of our history, we were nomads. If the group next door got aggressive, you just left, walked to the next valley. Conflict was possible, sure, but it wasn't a trap. Then came farming, and everything broke. Because a field full of wheat can't run away. A herd of cattle can't be picked up and carried off. A village you spent years building can't just be abandoned. For the first time ever, humans had wealth that couldn't move. And wealth that can't move is wealth worth killing for. You can literally see it in the dirt. Right after farming spreads, the walls show up. Ditches, fences, watchtowers. And here's my favorite detail. One of the earliest towns we know of had no walls at all. Instead, they built their houses smashed right up against each other. No streets, no doors on the ground. You got into your home through a hole in the roof, which meant the whole outside of the town was one big blank windowless wall. You want to attack? Cool. Climb a flat wall while people drop things on your head. They didn't build a fort. They built their whole town into a fort. And that tells you everything. You don't design your entire life around getting attacked, unless attacks are real. But raids aren't war yet. Something turned the raid into the campaign. And that something was power. Kings, chiefs, bosses who could command people, gather resources, and point violence in one direction. At a scale no little band of hunters could ever match. The first city-states started fighting over land, and their soldiers weren't a screaming mob anymore. Carved into ancient stone, you can see them marching in formation, shoulder to shoulder, shields locked, spears out. The very first organized battle line in human history. And that same monument shows vultures carrying off the body parts of the dead. It's a war trophy. Somebody was proud of this. Then one man took it even further. He built the first professional army. Soldiers who didn't go home after the fight. Soldiers who trained all year. Who got fed and paid by the state. Whose entire job was war. And that changes everything. Because now, you don't fight when you have to. You fight whenever you want to. You can strike any season, any distance, any time you decide. That's the moment war stopped being defense and became a choice. Here's a chilling little detail most people miss. For hundreds of thousands of years, our weapons were just tools. A spear is for hunting. An axe is for wood. Sure, they can kill a person, but that's not what they were for. Then we made something new, something that had one job. The mace. A heavy stone head on a stick. You can't cut meat with it. You can't chop wood. You can't dig or build or hunt. A mace does exactly one thing. It caves in a human skull. And that's the line right there. That's the moment we made an object that exists for nothing but killing our own kind. And get this, that weapon became a symbol, a sign of royalty. Kings put it in their portraits. The picture they picked to show off their power was them, arm raised, about to crush another man's head. War wasn't just something that happened to us anymore. It was how we defined ourselves. But here's the real question, the hard one. How? How do you get human beings who feel each other's pain, who bond with strangers, who are literally wired for empathy? How do you get those people to calmly kill other people who are exactly like them? And the answer is a trick every single culture on Earth figured out on its own. You make the other group not human. Give them a different name, a different label. You decide your people are the real people, and they're something else. And the second someone is on the other side of that line, the empathy just switches off. That's not modern. That's not civilization. That's an old feature of the human brain. Because here's the truth. The hardest part of war was never building a better weapon. The hardest part was convincing people to use it. So, the answer you came for. No, we didn't invent war, not like flipping a switch. There was no single day, no single genius, no single moment. The capacity is ancient, maybe older than our species. The chimps prove it, the oldest bones prove it. But that capacity only becomes war under the right conditions, the right pressures, the right stakes. And for most of our story, those conditions just weren't there. Then, around 12,000 years ago, they were. Farming gave us something worth fighting over. Settling down gave us borders worth defending. Kings gave us the machine to organize it. And we built weapons made for one thing only. Piece by piece, we assembled it. And tonight, right now, somewhere on Earth, a weapon is being loaded. The technology would blow a caveman's mind. But the reason? The reason hasn't changed one bit. Somebody has something. Somebody else wants it. And the distance between those two facts is still measured in the same thing it always has been: bodies. If that hit you the way it hit me, you're exactly who I make these for. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.